Oh, welcome into another episode of Hockey Royalty Live, the official podcast of HockeyRoyalty.com. The boys are back in town, and we're talking some LA Kings hockey. The season's about to heat up, so we're talking rookie tournament, training camp, and will these young guns take the next step into their development? Get in the chat, like, and subscribe. Let's go. Well, welcome everybody in. Dan P in here, first chat of the day. Hey, another day closer to hockey season. We agree with you. Johnny Van Potna, Clark Train. We're all here for it. We're gonna be talking about that later. His comments got me fired up, ready to go. Shank Master, let's go. Davo, let's get the season started, boys. Let's get this season started. I think took a lot of time off in the summertime. I know I'm well rested, a little rusty there in the beginning there, but it felt good to get back in the chair. But how you guys been?
Good man. Yeah, it was a fun weekend in El Segundo, getting ready for a hockey season, I guess, with the rookie Faceoff. So now I feel like I'm gearing up, ready for tomorrow in training camp. How you doing, Joe?
I'm just ready for hockey because the way Everton's going, losing games left and right, blowing leads left and right, I've about had it. So I'm looking forward to hockey season. Welcome back, Rando. Good to have you back.
Thanks, guys. Good to be back. Just needed some time away and had a family vacation. Little reunion we did. First time I've seen my nephews in a couple years, so that was good to go out there and kind of just take some time away, which definitely needed it, but also plenty of rest, and so letting you guys know here at the Hockey Roll Fandom, we got a lot of good stuff coming your way. I'm probably going to be trying to put out somewhere in between 8 to 12 episodes in the next 3 weeks before the season starts. We're going to be doing crossovers with other teams. We're going to be trying to put out as much camp news as possible. We want you guys pumped up as much as we're pumped up for the season. So we're really trying to get you as much content this year. We're really having some ideas coming to the table regarding the podcast. So hope you guys enjoyed Hockey Royalty so far, but we're going to try to kick it up a notch this season. And we're glad you guys are going to come with us along the journey. Let's start with news around the league. News for the Kings, at least, started off with the Arthur Kaliyev, kind of like the thorn in the side of the offseason. Will he sign? Will he get traded? What's going on here? What's going on there? And finally inks a 1-year deal. His camp is saying that he still wants to be traded, but he feels like he needs to be in a camp to get seen. So what do you guys think about this deal and just kind of the situation as a whole going forward?
Yeah, it's kind of the whole thing's been just strange, right? And we haven't really got an answer. I feel like we still don't really have an answer to this whole situation. Yeah, he signs, but it's a player that really has no leverage as an RFA. Even then, if he didn't sign, he'd have to sit out all the way till December 1st, I think, and that's when the deadline. If he doesn't sign then he just can't even play. So I'm sure he still wants to be traded. It sounds like we'll see if the Kings help him out in that department. But if he's on the ice tomorrow, I guess we have to just consider him part of the Kings team for right now, and maybe or who knows, maybe he's part of or in the lineup come some of the preseason games.
Of course he wants to be traded. Where does he fit? The team hasn't exactly spoken glowingly about him in press conferences. He has gone this far without being signed. He's made it clear he wants a trade. They've brought in Fogle. Lewis is back. Blake has talked and mentioned by name Turcotte and Thomas. They acquired Tanner Jeannot. There's no spot for Arthur Kaliyev, whether we like it or not. And, we all hoped that he would turn into something. I've said before, I'm not going to sit here and pound the table to get Arthur Kaliyev in the lineup. There's times where he just doesn't look as engaged as he needs to be. Maybe just the system that the Kings play, it's not a fit for him. That's entirely possible. But it's a little disappointing that they weren't able to find a deal to this point. Obviously, his value is pretty low. But I don't see. Obviously, you never know. It's hard to envision a spot where he fits in this lineup. I mean, right now, like I'm penciling him in as the 13th forward. I don't see, where I would have him in the 12, but I don't see where he fits for Jim Hiller in this lineup.
Yeah, it's interesting. Is he coming in with a chip on his shoulder? Is he going to make waves in camp? Is there going to be something that he's worked on? I mean, from what I've seen, I mean, I'm sure the Kings have kept an eye on him, but generally you see it in football a lot, and you see it in other sports when there's a contract dispute or a player is unhappy, they kind of ghost the organization a little bit, and kind of settle into their own camp. I wonder what he's been working on in the offseason. Has he been taking this personally to where he's really trying to change his game? It'd just be interesting to see what he pops in. Maybe Artie's the guy that we're talking about in camp that's going to be the surprise of camp. Who knows? So I think that it's unfortunate because I don't think he was used correctly in a lot of the time in LA. He also didn't earn his time 5-on-5, but he really was a power play specialist that needed to get ice time by being good at 5-on-5. So it was he wasn't able to use his specialty, so to speak. So, I mean, 1-year deal, 800 something K. So he's not really breaking the bank for the Kings if they can't trade him. So we'll see how it works out. I'm not really overly concerned. It's just kind of a wait and see type thing. And camp starts tomorrow. We'll see where he's penciled in the lines. Is he with Group A or Group B? Where is he paired with? So it'll be telling tomorrow, the first glimpse and into the games, how they view him and his chance to get going on this team. But who gets us going early? Sorry, there is Carson McNitt with a $5 holla. We back best of time for the sports season. Appreciate you, Carson. Sorry, Joe, I didn't mean to cut you off, but we got to get our man Carson up here.
Absolutely.
With $5.
No, I just go back to, you look at a lot of the Kings forwards. A lot of them are north-south. They can get up and down the ice. They're good in both ends of the ice. They've added guys that are similar in that fashion, right? Warren Fogle can fly. Tanner Jeannot is going to get up and down the ice, very north-south. Where Kaliyev, the Kings aren't a team that possesses the puck out of the zone, out of their own defensive zone, right? They kind of chip it to the neutral zone. They want their wingers to fly into it and try to create chances off the rush. I mean, and just I don't know how much of that fits Arthur Kaliyev's game, where, go back to his draft. I mean, his skating has never been the strongest suit. So, you just wonder if there's a fit. Maybe that's just been the issue. It's not necessarily nothing against the player. And if the organization wants to play a certain way, they're not going to certainly going to change it just because of him. I just wonder how much of that plays into this, and hopefully, because he's still such a young kid, young player. You don't want to see him just kind of flounder here. I really hope he gets an opportunity. It'd be great if it's with LA, but if they trade him, hopefully he gets an opportunity elsewhere.
Yeah, it seems like it's like a product. This whole Arthur Kaliyev situation, ever since he's been drafted, it's like a product of them trying to turn him into something that he's not. They try to make him into this two-way player. That's you watch Arthur Kaliyev play and you see the traits that he has. That no, sorry, that's not what he's going to be. He's probably going to be a pure sniping goal scorer, probably in the NHL if he excels to become a regular full-time NHLer. So, I mean, I don't want to say he's one of the, I guess, ones that fell off in terms of the whole prospect pool, but it certainly seems like that's the case, because when we were talking about the Kings prospect pool in its heyday, Arthur Kaliyev was a name that we mentioned constantly.
For sure.
And now it's like he's a forgotten thing at this point, and it's really unfortunate.
Russ, you brought up a sentence there that I thought was interesting. Turning Kaliyev into something that he's not. It seems like the Kings organization, with the style of hockey they want to bring, the people they're signing on, they've also signed these creative type players who are offensive only type players, and then asked them to play a heavy defensive game. And Ilya Kovalchuk and Arthur Kaliyev, the comments about Brent Clarke's game from Jim Hiller. You have Fiala and Kempe wanting, in their closing statements at the end of the season, we want to be let free almost. So like they take all these highly offensive skilled guys and try to make them play a game that's not theirs. Is that in your opinion, is that bad player acquisition? Is that bad coaching or like not fitting your system around your talent? Like, I don't know. It seems like they've been doing quite a bit of that.
I mean, yeah, you could just say it's all of the above. And I guess it's really concerning for when you have a player like Brent Clarke, especially, who, like you mentioned, Randon, when I asked Jim Miller last year about Brent Clarke, I think I asked him a question about him being a rover. Like, I think John Tortorella just mentioned the rover term when they acquired Drysdale, and I asked him about Brent Clarke being in a similar situation. They said, no, we want Brent Clarke to play defense. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, we want him to play defense too, but you got to let Brent Clarke be Brent Clarke. That's why we talk about Kevin Fiala all the time. We even made shirts that says you have to let Kev be Kev, right? Like, that's what he does best. And when you restrict him, or it's almost like he's playing with one arm behind his back, because it's like you have to let you require these players to excel in the areas that they do well in. And it seems like they really try to limit some of these players in that. I don't know. It's just it's strange almost.
I'm glad you mentioned it, Randy, because I had the exact same thought, and you rattled off the players. And actually, I believe, I don't want to misquote, but I believe it was Corey Pronman on All the King's Men recent podcast. They were talking about Matt Mania, and I believe one of them referenced, I think, the coaching staff wanting Matt Mania to play kind of a simple game. And it's like, I understand wanting to make sure that they're getting fundamentals right and getting, but at some level, like, especially in this particular tournament, Matt Mania is not going to, he's not going to be a player that's like competing for a spot right away, right? He's going to be a work in progress over the next couple of years. Don't you want him to go show us what you are great at, right? Show us what your skills are. Show us what you do well. That's one of the things, and I always like to say, whenever I mention this, I fully acknowledge I'm coaching at a vastly different level than the NHL. This isn't meant to demean anything or make it sound like I'm on the same level, but like when we have tryouts and we have different battle stuff or whatever, it's like, show it, do what you do well. If you're somebody that scores goals, go score goals. If you're a playmaker, make plays. If you're somebody that's a physical player, be physical. Like, show us what it is that you're great at and try to make this team type of thing, right? That's something along those lines. And it's like, I don't want you to say, okay, this is what you're really good at. I don't want you to do that though. It's like, I don't know. I think there's time and a place for that. Like in practices, like in certain practices and certain drills, like, okay, I know you're going to want to jump up in the play, but for this particular drill, I want you to hold tight. I want you to hold your whatever that the situation is. Maybe in a certain drill or in a specific drill or week of practice or something, you're going to really hone in on a skill set or hone in on something. To rein a guy in at something like this seems silly, but hey, I'm just a high school assistant coach. What do I know?
I don't know. It seems to me, and like I always had a coach that said, "Don't work on your weaknesses, just make your strengths stronger." And and like it's like trying to get a guy who throws 100+ in MLB to learn 4 pitches. Like he needs one. Like he needs one pitch, and he needs to be really good at maybe 2. And I just think it's like you're limiting the elite potential because you drafted them for the elite traits. Mm-hmm. So why not let the elite trait be their way they make it into the NHL? And if they have to change because they're not elite enough in that trait, or Matthew isn't a good enough offensive forward and he has to balance out his game to earn minutes, then so be it. But Clarke doesn't need to balance out his game. He needs to be an elite scoring offensive defenseman. I mean, yeah, you look at some of the blunders that Quinn Hughes makes, but everybody would be clamoring for him to be on any roster because of how dynamic he is offensively. So I think it's something that we're going to be interested to see how the team approaches it. Jim Miller's first season, and how they'll approach these offensive gifted guys. Will they rein it in, or will they let them fly? We'll guess we'll start seeing at the beginning of the season how that goes. Let's move it over to the rest of the league. Obviously, Sid inks another contract. I don't know if he just likes the number 87 or whatever.
He very much does, yeah.
But same number, and I kind of like it. He said, "Hey, they asked him like, you could have got a lot more money. Like what? Why?" He goes, "I just want to win cups, and if this helps my team, 8.7 is enough to feed my family. So, like let's try to win another cup." So I know not a lot of players are like that. I mean, especially with the salary cap going up, and he's earned enough money, and I'm sure he's got plenty of endorsements as well. But it's just interesting to kind of have that. Tom Brady was known for that. I think a lot of players have taken hometown discounts to try to win cups later in their career. But he was still playing at the peak of his game. It's pretty interesting to see him go for 8.7 when Draisaitl just signed for 14 million or whatever.
Crosby's an underpaid probably his whole career. I think Dom Luszczyszyn had a tweet that he estimated based on his value calculator and all that stuff, that he's probably estimated that he's left about $40 million on the table over the course of his career, just because he keeps signing for 8.7. So good on him. I mean, it's great. I love him. It's great to see him still playing at a high level. So it's great for Pittsburgh to get him inked. He's, but as long as Crosby can stay in this league and play at the levels he's playing at, freaking awesome.
Can you imagine those conversations between him and his agent? His agent's like, all right, I think we can get about 12.7. He's like, no, it's a 8.7. No, I said 12.7, maybe 13. Okay, I'll just call the Penguins. We'll do 8.7, and like the agent's probably just furious. Like,
you got the easiest job in the league.
I'm repping Sidney Crosby, and I could be making all this money, and like you're killing.
Probably
me.
Hurting his commissions a little bit. But
yeah,
all right. I mean, if he's trying to take a little bit of a discount to win cups, I don't know. I don't know if Pittsburgh's capable of winning a cup here in the next 2 years.
Yeah. Like they got maybe a 1 year window that they have a shot.
It needs to be like
that window.
Did they make any big moves in the offseason? I'd have to. It always like this new season, when the new season starts, you're like, watch a game, you're like, oh yeah, that guy's on that team now. It's like, Brett Pessy's on the Devils. And it's like, oh crap. No, I got to remember all this stuff that happened in July. But
Kevin Hayes. But I think that's about it.
Yeah.
Hayes.
We'll see how the roster shapes up.
The McGroarty trade. We'll see if he plays. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, they need their top end guys to be healthy. I'll say another one that was just signed, a favorite of mine, Thomas Harley of Dallas, and 2-year bridge deal, 2 years, $4 million per. He could be double digits in his next contract. I love that kid. Star defenseman for, no pun intended, the Dallas Stars.
Dallas has some interesting moves that they'll have to, or decisions to make in the next couple of years. If that's only 2 years for Harley, they have Heiskanen already at 8, which is going to look very valuable here in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Robertson, I think, is going to need a new deal soon. He only signed like 4 years, I think, a couple of years ago.
He's only got 2 years left. And actually, they just signed Esa Lindell to 5.25 for 3 or 4 years. 5 years, actually, I think it was. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, they're going to have some stuff to
cue
deal
the
with.
Robertson to LA rumors.
What's that?
It's like cue the Robertson to LA rumors.
Let's check.
I don't mind it. And then didn't one of the Bens retired? One of the Bens retired.
Jordy. Jamie's a UFA after this year. I think he's got 1 year left. So
we'll see.
Yeah,
well, let's get into it for more Kings news here. The rookie face-off. Our man on the ground there, Russell Morgan, was taking it all in and wrote a nice article about it. So if you need to go check that out, hockeyroyalty.com, you can. But give us your MVPs of the rookie face-off and kind of what you saw as a whole.
Yeah, fun 3 games. First game, unfortunately, was a shutout, so no scoring. Didn't want to see that, but it is what it is. Second game, started off a little slow for the Kings, but came back and tied it up. I think it was 3-3. Ended up losing 4-3 in overtime. I believe it was to Utah. And then the game against Anaheim on Monday, that was really fun, actually. It was a really entertaining game. So then the Kings came up with the overtime win, so that was cool. But as far as MVPs, I mean, the one player that stood out to me throughout the entire weekend and played in every game was Angus Booth, left shot defenseman. He's going to be coming into his first professional season out of the QMJHL. And presumably starting with the Reign. But, I mean, it seemed like in a tournament where, especially in the first game when you have Brent Clarke, you have all these big names, Liam Greentree, of course, the first-round pick, and Eric Portillo and Carter George, and everyone's excited about Cohen Zemer and how he's going to look and all that. I mean, it just seems like Angus Booth was just out there playing in every situation whenever he was called upon by Marco Sturm, whether it be shorthanded, on the power play, overtime. I mean, it wasn't really. He's not necessarily a flashy player. You can kind of watch when you watch him play, but he skates really well. He's really, really good at puck retrievals, and we know this Kings team really thrives on defensemen who are good at puck retrievals in their own end. And when you have a player like Angus Booth, who I think was paired with Jacob Dvorak for one game and then paired with Jared Woolley in the other two, those players aren't necessarily the more mobile defensemen, known more for their physicality or their length. But so Angus Booth was kind of called upon to do a lot of the dirty work in the defensive areas as far as retrieving pucks that were dumped in and maybe trying to start offense in that first pass. And he was great. I mean, he just was solid in really every aspect when he played, I thought. And he really shined in the second game on Saturday. And that was the game that Brent Clarke sat. And I remember in the third period when the Kings, I think, were down 3-1, Angus Booth was out there almost every other shift, it seemed like. You kind of just look up in the third period and Angus Booth is back out there. And then it was the same thing for overtime. And it's funny because I caught up with Angus Booth after the game, and I just was asking him, like, hey, man, you seem like you were out there for quite a bit. How you feeling? He's like, oh, man, coach was putting me out there, and I would be lying if I was saying I was tired. I wasn't tired. So, but he had a huge smile on his face. He's looking forward to his first pro season. He's excited to kind of showcase what he can do. And he knows that he told me it's going to be an adjustment period, especially for where he's coming from in the junior ranks at the Q, which is not necessarily known for a division or a league with a lot of defensive structure. So you're coming into a team and an organization like the Kings that's going to be really drilled down in structure and defense. So it's going to be a little bit of a learning curve, but I'm excited to see how he performs because, I mean, if anything, we've seen already a defenseman, a fourth, fifth round pick, like in Jordan Spence, come from the Q and make a real quick jumper in the AHL. So maybe if Angus Booth can be that next one.
I thought he was great. I really liked him. And it's a little weird. I don't know. He doesn't really fit the mold of where, the LA Kings left D, what they seem to look for in that side and that position. But I really liked him quite a bit. I echo everything you said there. I mean, I thought Clarke looked incredible, as you would have thought. I thought every time we see, I'm just going to rattle off a few names here and throw it out to you guys, but like Atu Yamson, every time we see him, I just think he impresses me. So I think this is going to be his first year over in North America, so there'll be that kind of learning curve, but really excited to see what he can develop into. I mean, this will be a big first year for him, but he's been playing pro over in Europe for a while now, so really liked what I've seen from him. I thought, and Russ, let me know, I'm curious your thoughts there. My thoughts were, so the first game, Pinelli centered Greentree and Zemer, and then the second game, Pinelli did not play. And I just didn't think that line had the same zip to it, the same scoring chances, the same jump, which I wasn't like hoping for that necessarily, but it's like I wanted to see, was Pinelli driving that line, and we're talking about one game here, so I'm not going too crazy, but I really thought that Pinelli being absent, and I missed most of the third game, so I'll leave that to you, but I thought Pinelli's absence showed in the second game for the wingers Greentree and Zemer, where that line was much more effective, I thought, the first game.
Yeah, I totally echo that. I mean, Pinelli, especially in the first game, you kind of tell he was he was named the captain of the team. You kind of tell he was taking on that more responsible role in the ice. Mm-hmm. Like it's kind of we've seen from players that are coming back. I remember seeing the same kind of thing from LaFerriere last year. He was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to take more of a leadership role and play that two-way game, not necessarily be that flashy player. And that's kind of what we saw from Pinelli this year in the two games that he played. I thought the first game was a little bit more shaky. Definitely carried that line, though. Definitely the best line for the Kings. But in the third game against Anaheim, I thought that line definitely got a little bit more chemistry, or at least those three players got a lot more energy and a little bit more chemistry from the two games that they played. And just kind of named Liam Greentree, I thought just got better and better with each game. The third game, he really started to fly. Got a little bit more comfortable, started making a little bit more plays, especially in the offensive zone. So it's good to see those three. Zemer, I was maybe looking to see a little bit more of improvement in his skating ability. I know last year he's really solid with the puck. He's really solid in tight spaces along the boards and whatnot. He loves contact.
Yeah.
But in open space, just feels like there's a lot of movement, but not a lot of actual movement on the ice in terms of where he's actually skating to. So if he can just kind of improve on that skating ability, I feel like there's a really solid player there. So I know with Zemer especially, there's a decision to make as far as whether he can go back to the WHL or he can make the jump to the AHL. But I think after watching these games, and especially with the injury that he missed pretty much all of last year, I think it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if Zemer went back to the WHL and just totally dominated. So that'll be interesting to watch.
Here's where I'm at with him. We've talked about this, Brandon. I think you've mentioned this quite a bit in the past, where if like you have a guy that puts up a lot of points in the junior in his junior years, but as he gets up in level, he can't do the same. You can't produce the same. So you have to find something else to make you effective. So I actually think he's got that in him. He's like you said, he loves contact. He was any chance he got, it looked like he was willing to hit somebody. So I feel like he's a guy who, he's a more than a point per game player in the WHL, but as he gets and transitions to pro and gets to the AHL, whenever that is, even if he doesn't produce, I can see him being a player. Like he'll find a role because of what he brings other than his offense. So you're right. We'll see. I don't think the WHL is a horrible spot for him, especially coming off the injury. He only played 23 games, I think, last year. So, but I think he's the type of player, the style of player that can carve out a role for himself, even if the offense doesn't necessarily come.
I want to cycle back to Jamson real quick, because I like the first thing you said about him, where it's like we watch him play or we watch these games that he's involved in, and you don't necessarily pay attention to him, but he kind of warrants your attention by the things he does on the ice. And that was the same thing that happened this year. I remember talking about it last year. I was like, oh, well, I'm going to watch the Ferrier. I'm going to watch whoever else that was there and whatnot. But then it's just like you see this Yamson, who's a 7th round pick. You don't really, not a lot of focus on him. And then he just makes a play and you're like, oh yeah, he's here. And he ends up scoring a goal, has an assist. And I believe he finished with, I think they only counted 3 points, but I believe he had 4 points on the weekend. Definitely led the Kings. But yeah, it's like whenever he has the puck on his stick, especially in the neutral zone, he's trying to make a play to get entry into the offensive zone, and more than likely he's going to get entry because of that skill set he has. I think at times he was probably trying to do a little too much, which is totally fine. I mean, especially in games like this, and that can maybe be reined in a little bit when the games come in the AHL, because he'll be making his first jump into the AHL. He's been playing pro in Finland. So when you have that transition from that Finnish ice, that larger sheet, over to NA, that'll be interesting to see if he's able to pull off a lot of those moves that he has that confidence to make in some of these games in the AHL level. But I'm excited for him.
I think it's good telling, because with Greentree, a lot of the draft stuff was, he was the only player on his team, so he had to take over games for them to be anywhat effective. And then when he played for Canada, it really seemed like he got lost with players of his own caliber. So that's good to hear that Greentree was kind of not out of place with playing with Pinelli and everything like that. Jamson has been the 7th round gem for a long time and a fan favorite. A lot of people really like him and post a lot of Liga hockey on Twitter with his highlights. So I think it's good that he's starting there. Well, like you said, Russ, will he be just as effective on the smaller sheet? A lot of those Swedish and Finnish players are east to west type players and try to make plays going east to west, and it's a much more north to south game in the United States. So it's very interesting there. Now, I know big thorn in the side. We don't want to have too much positive. We got to make it a point here. 2nd round pick Dvorak was kind of maybe a puzzling pick there. The organization gave us nothing but, hey, like, he's got all this talent, but every single draft person that we read, hey, this guy can't skate, can't recognize the play. And so where has he fit in the last 2 rookie faceoffs for you? Did you see improvement? Did he still look out of place? What was your view on Dvorak?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I haven't been impressed watching Jacob Dvorak play. And you don't want to be critical in these games at all, but you want to see a little bit of improvement, especially after he played in the games last year. And the only reason we really get critical in terms of the draft pick, I mean, because he's probably going to get drafted no matter what. He's a second round draft pick. I think he was high on some other people's boards and whatnot. But it's like you hear these terms and traits that are being described by the Kings management about this player that are so totally contradicted from a lot of major scouting departments. Kings think he's a great skater, and a lot of scouting departments think he's just was one of the worst skaters in the draft. And it was just, Joe, I thought your tweet about Dvorak being just like the prototypical left shot defenseman on a Kings team was so perfect, because I think I'd mentioned to you too, I was like watching the game play, and it's like I'm watching this pair of Dvorak, Jakub Dvorak and Brent Clarke play together, and I was just getting like Andreas Englund, like Jordan Spence vibes from last year. It was just like Brent Clarke is trying to make all these plays. He passes off to his defender, who just feels like he's got a tennis ball in his stick. He just can't make a decision with it. So it was tough. I mean, like I said, you don't want to be critical with this whole thing. And I know John Hoban had that report about now Dvorak wants to play either in the AHL or he wants to go back to Europe. And it's like, well, I mean, he was just playing in, I think it was Swift Current up in the WHL, and he had just transitioned from the Czech league. So I'm not sure why he doesn't feel comfortable to go back to the WHL, maybe try to improve his game there. If it's Europe or the AHL, I don't even really see a spot for him on the Ontario Reign lineup. You look up and down that lineup, there's a ton of left shot defensemen there, especially with how Angus Booth played this weekend. And you have Caleb Jones down there, Jacob Overara. There's a lot of left shot defensemen. So if Dvorak's looking for a spot on the Ontario Reign, I'm sorry, there isn't one. So if it's Europe or bust, or Europe or the AHL, I mean, Kings have a tough decision to make there.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know how tough it is. I think you're kind of outlining how it really isn't that tough. But
is Europe back in like the Czech league? Is it Liga or the SHL? Right. Like the SHL is a top league, True. Is he playing there, or is, and you see a lot. I mean, Kevin Fiala was from Switzerland. You see a lot of these Central Europeans go up north and play because it's a better style of hockey. I mean, I know their camps are starting soon. A lot of those teams are probably full. I believe he's still under 20 years old, so he might be able to play for the under 20 teams up there. I don't know when the cutoff date for that age group is, but there might be plenty of options over there for him to sign across the pond. And if he feels closer to home, and he didn't like his time in Canada, you ultimately want the player to feel comfortable.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
development.
And he came over to Canada because it's a better source of hockey than it is when he was playing, in before his draft year. Well, if he goes and plays in Liga or the SHL, it's still going to be a better form of hockey than the Canadian Hockey League. And maybe not to the level of the AHL. How many minutes is he going to get? I don't know. I would rather have him play first line minutes in the Canadian Hockey League rather than try to find a team last minute across the pond. But ultimately, the kid's got to decide what is best for his development and his agent and his family. But, I think the Kings have said, hey, we try to steer along where we believe the player should be, but it's ultimately the player's decision. I think they should steer a little harder with Dvorak and kind of force their hand and say, hey, well, this is where we think this is best for you. If you're playing great hockey by the end of the year, there's always going to be a spot on the AHL if you can earn it, but we're not just going to throw you to the wolves there to start the season.
And I think it's important to remember that, I agree with Russ. Like I did not come away impressed over this weekend, but I also didn't expect to, because in his draft year, he was a player who was young, obviously, and I think even young for his age, young in terms of experience, because he missed a ton of time with a pretty significant injury. I want to say it was a knee injury, if I recall. But so he missed some time as a young age, and so he's a big boy. This is going to be a project, right? This isn't, and by project, it's not like 2 years and he's ready to go. Like this is a 4-year, 5-year project. I figured like we're still probably 3 years away from Dvorak being like in consideration for an NHL spot. And to me, that's not his fault. He's going to try to develop as best he can. To me, again, I think that's just poor process on the organization. I don't know if that's Rob Blake saying, hey, it's as if they plan on playing the 1-3-1 forever, and because they did the same thing. Like Jared Bully, 6'4" monster left shot D man, and then you look at some of the right D that they've drafted recently. Not even Clarke, but like Matt Mania, Otto Celine, smaller right shot guys. It's like just pick players that can play, because my whole thing with Dvorak is like, even if it clicks for the kid, his ceiling is what, 5'6"
bottom pair. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to this is what I don't understand philosophically with the Kings sometimes, and I'm sure they're not the only one. It's just I follow the Kings, so that's like where I'm at. But I don't understand it. Like you're picking this player because he's a big guy, he's left shot, and okay, like I guess they think he's a good skater, which again goes against pretty much everybody else. But fine, if you see something there, if you see something in his traits that's gonna I can. But even with that, like he's not a top 4 caliber defenseman. So you're reaching on a guy in the second round for what? Like you could sell me on the fact that if, the ceiling's not high, but he's a high floor guy. He's gonna progress quick. He'll be in the NHL in 2 years, right? Like something like that, where he can be a contributor early, not going to be a wow guy, but can be like honestly
probably what Kirsanov would have been if he wasn't in Russia,
or like Jacob Morari, who
Yeah.
can progress pretty quickly, will never wow you, will never be a player that's going to be a top 4 defenseman consistently, but can move quickly because he's a pro brain. He gets it from moving the pucks, not the strongest skater, but he can do enough, and he makes a first pass. Like, so I can see that, but that's just not the case. This is a project, and it's a project to get to a ceiling of bottom pair. I think that's a miss. I just think process wise that I don't get it. I don't know, again, whether that's Blake saying this is the prototype of a player that I want for this position, or if it's Yannetti and his team just falling in love with the guy. And I just think it's wrong. I think it's a miss. That's all. I don't know. I mean, because again, if he ends up making it and he's a top 4 guy, then I'll be wrong. But it's hard to see that.
It's so weird how GMs get locked into certain things like that. And I remember for the longest time, the Niners GM wouldn't draft a corner if his arm length wasn't over like 30 something inches. It's like, because they wanted tall, gangly corners. Well, tall, gangly corners can't change direction very well, and you get all these elite wide receivers. And so it's like you draft the guy to play one certain thing, and the Niners played cover 3 and we didn't mix it up. Well, when you play a team that can beat cover 3, or you have players that are dynamic and these guys can't cover, you're limiting what this team can do. And I think like it's telling the Kirsanov, big stay-at-home defenseman, Mervari stay-at-home defenseman. I mean, he can actually move, but England, you have Joel, Edmondson, you have Gavrikov, you have Mikey Anderson, like all these guys are all the same player to a degree, with their number one skill set being on the defensive side of the puck. So we'll see if it really changes going forward. If it's not, I mean, because Dvorak was the past couple of years, they got a big body winger in the first round this year. Early returns look good on that, but we'll see what Dvorak becomes out of that and how the team progresses. Joe, you want to get one more word in before we move on?
I want to end the rookie face-off on a positive note, because I know you said you wouldn't be all positive, so we went on a little bit of a negative, if you will, Dvorak. I'm going to bring it back. Bring it back and just say, listen, I don't know anything about this guy. I knew nothing about this guy, but I sitting there and I'm watching on this exact laptop that I'm doing this stream on. I'm like, oh, this number 62 can play. Who's this guy? Parker Berg. Okay, let's read a little bit about Parker Berg. Stick taps to Clark for Norris on Twitter. Kings fan on Twitter, follows a lot of Kings prospect stuff. He was pumping his tires back in dev camp, and that was a miss for me. I'm not familiar with the guy, but not a big. He's left shot defenseman. He can move. He can move. He can move okay. He got a little bit of PP time. Moves the puck okay. Like, he looked like a competent player. I was like, this is not a normal LA Kings left shot D. So I'm sure he's going to be banished to the sun by the end of training camp. But I'm just happy to see Parker Berg get a chance here. He's going to be in camp. Again, he was wearing number 62 in this rookie face-off, and just another left shot D. When you look at the left shot D, speaking of Russ, you mentioned how in Ontario, they're like, there's a few guys that are starting to compile, right? You've got them over our Angus Booth is coming. Cole Krieger's another one. Listen, Parker Berg looks like he can play the part. Certainly more so. And it's nice to see because of those guys that we just mentioned, Booth, he can actually get around the ice. Parker Berg can actually get around the ice. I think Krieger's another one that can get around the ice a little bit more than your prototypical LA Kings left shot D. So it's kind of weird. They're drafting the Dvoraks and the Woolies who are what they are. Yet they've also kind of sprinkled in these kind of guys to at least whether it's just in camp or whatever it might be. So I don't know. I just want to give a shout though to Parker Berg. I thought he had a good rookie face-off. Happy to see he's going to be in camp.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch him in camp because, to be honest, I didn't pay too much attention to him. Cole Davis was another invite that looked good, but yeah, and
around Cole Davis
camp, too. And Cole Davis, I believe, is a teammate of Liam Greentree's at Windsor, so that was an interesting dynamic too. Just one more thing, I want to touch on the goalies because I thought Carter George and Eric Portillo both. I mean, it's like. You don't know what to really dive into too much, or you're not going to put a microscope under the goalie performances. But I mean, when you're playing in front of or behind a makeshift team that just gets put together and has one practice, and it's like, okay, you go play 3 games, you're not going to see a ton of structure. I'm sure you're going to get a lot of pucks coming at you. And I thought Eric Portillo and Carter George both played really well. It's almost like I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself, but it's like as far as you watch them play, it's like you get a Martin Jones, Jonathan Quick dynamic a little bit because you have this big, tall, fundamental goalie who's just going to get in his position and stop pucks. And that's exactly what Eric Portillo does. We saw, I think he stopped right in the first game. He stopped a 2-on-1. He stopped the penalty shot right in the first period or breakaway right in the first period. Looked great. And then same thing with Carter George. He was like that Jonathan Quick-like athleticism where it's like he's going sprawling saves post to post, making these crazy athletic glove saves. And I thought he looked really good too. And I believe the only goals that the 2 goalies led in, which wasn't that much, were power play goals or goals where they were shorthanded. So I think even straight, they both pitched shutouts. So it's good performance and good start to training camp for the 2 netminders.
What hopefully is not a shutout is you're betting for this weekend using DraftKings Sportsbook. Code THPN. It is NFL time. TD Tutty taking it to the house. Whatever you want to call a touchdown, no matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Ready to place your bet on the NFL? Trying betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. Or you can do the spreads here at DraftKings. It looks like Thursday night football is the Jets are favored by 6, and now these odds are subject to change. Over-unders are 38.5. If you want to go straight money line for the Patriots to upset, plus 225 on your bet. So get into DraftKings, code THPN. If you're ready to score big, the number 1 place to bet touchdowns draft flow, download DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers. You're going to get $250 in bonus bets when you just bet $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on DraftKings. Only at DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY. That's text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill and Casino Resort in Kansas. 21 age restriction and eligibility is varied by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. NFL Plus Premium offers only available to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms. Well, we've been talking about a lot of young guns, and that's the theme of this episode with our pretty boy Brent Clarke there on the thumbnail coming in here for YouTube. But we kind of sprinkled it in a little bit during the offseason, but my co-host and I are in agreement. The way this team takes the next step is the young guns stepping up. Where are we going to get value from a contract standpoint? Where are these kids going to take their game to the next level to get production up and down the lineup? 2 of those big ones are going to be from our second-year pros in Brent Clarke and LaFerriere. So we're going to start with them, and then we're going to kind of talk about some other players. Obviously, you're my guy, so to speak. Russ was LaFerriere last year. banging the table. And I have not given up my conductor seat to the Brent Clarke Train Foundation here. So let's start with LaFerriere. Second year, got to play up and down the lineup, played with a bunch of different centers. This year, probably going to be asked to do a little bit more, have a little bit more responsibility with the team. Where do you see his game taking that next step, and what do you think his responsibility will be with the organization?
Yeah, he's a very curious player and probably one of the few X factors on this team in terms of what they're going to be asking for him or from him to start the year. It seems like they're going to be starting him off in the top 6. I mean, we'll see for sure at training camp starting tomorrow. But yeah, I mean, he's going to be leaned upon to produce a little bit more. It was kind of an up and down season for him last year. It's always good when you have a rookie come in straight from college to come in and play 80-plus games in his first full NHL season. That's really rare, especially now. So to see him make that jump, that's great. But now it's like you want to see him make that jump in terms of production, and especially if he's going to be getting a first look, maybe on the first line, where it seems like that's where he's being penciled in at with Kopitar and Kempe. I have full confidence that he can still be a real productive top 6, maybe middle 6 player in the NHL. Whether that turns into like 20-plus goals this season, I don't know. Maybe that's probably a little too high. But if he nets like 15 goals, maybe 20-plus assists for like a 35-point season, I think that's pretty good. I don't necessarily see him getting too much power play time. Maybe get some PP2 minutes. But I just want to see some solid, even strength play, and I'll see a little bit more confidence in his game now, knowing that he's coming into his first or second season with a full off season, knowing that he's going to be in the NHL to start the year.
Yeah, and I think that's you hit the nail on the head. I think with like where he fits, and is he going to be somebody that produces enough to play in a top 6 role consistently? And I think that's the big question. And we genuinely don't know the answer to that. Obviously, I think he's a good player. I think he performed pretty well overall last year, but there was I thought he had a lot of opportunities that he just didn't click with, or he didn't finish. Like, he didn't find the back of the net enough. And that's, I think, going to have to be something that changes. I know everybody loves when I talk about Pierre-Luc Dubois and his slot passes, but he did have a lot of passes to the slot that led to shot attempts. A lot of those shot attempts from the slot seemed to come from Alex LaFerriere, and there just wasn't a lot of finish there. So if he can start to turn some of those into goals, we could be onto something. And I think that's a big question. I am excited about the player. I think he fits somewhere in this lineup. And I think what's nice is he's got the versatility because he's got the smarts and he's got the skill to play up, in a top 6. But obviously he's got the work rate that I think he can play in the bottom 6 as well. And he can be a versatile player. But at some point, the Kings have to get production from guys, and he's one of them.
I think if he had 35 points, it would be a disappointment to me on the first line. Like, I think the years of having Alex Iafallo and like having that utility guy be okay for first line play, I think it's over if we want to take that next step. So if he's getting full first line minutes the entire season, he needs to be a 45, 50-point player, in my opinion. That's a big jump? Yeah, it is. It's asking a lot from a guy who had, I think, 24 points last year. So you're asking him to double his production in his second season. But if the team is giving him that responsibility, you kind of got to produce at that point. I think he kind of will be up and down the lineup depending on where Fogle and Jeannot kind of like where they kind of see those players playing, who they want playing with Byfield, because I believe who they pair with Byfield is the most important thing, because you want that next progression into his game to take that next level. So we'll see how it all works out, because this whole thing is going to be interesting, and we'll talk about the centers on another episode, but where do they view the center depth throughout the whole season? How do they view it to start the season? Where do all these wingers pair out? But I think the positive things for LaFerriere is he was given a lot of responsibility as a rookie. So it seemed like they earned a lot of the trust there. And so I think they're going to have that trust going into season 2.
To just kind of piggyback off what I said, too, he was 5th among LA Kings forwards in shot attempts per 60, and he was 1st on the team in high danger chances per 60. he was getting his looks. He was
Mhm.
getting his looks, right? If we talked about it all year, like, not to again go back to Dubois, like if there were people that could finish on his line, that we might be having a different conversation. You look at the scoring opportunities that Alex Laferriere had.
8.2% is
He
what
was
he
good.
shot last year.
Yeah, and so hopefully you start to see that get up into the double digits, and he started to show a little bit more in the second half of the season. But he wasn't without opportunity last year, and I'll give him a pass because it's his first year. I'm not going to kill the kid, but it's now time. Whether we like it or not, it's a second year pro, but those pucks got to start finding the back of the net.
Yeah, like Brandon said, if he's getting first line minutes, then he needs to produce, and that's
Yeah.
why I wouldn't peg him there. I wouldn't put him in the first line. I mean, if we know Jim Hiller in the short time that he's been the coach, he's going to mix and match after the first shift. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see Laferriere get lined up at the start of the game on the first line, and then like minutes later he's playing on the third line with someone else. So we'll see how it happens and it plays out with Laferriere. But yeah, I'm expecting a jump in production for sure.
We saw that jump come from Byfield where, you guys were happy with a 45. I wanted more of a 60-point season. And we saw that jump and what it did to the Kings lineup and had the scoring depth, up and down the team. I think that Laferriere has a chance to do the same this year. Obviously not highly drafted, but was a point producer at Harvard, showed the ability to put the puck in the back of the net in the AHL and shot 8.2% last year. If Joe said this gets to 10 or 11 and he's able to find the high danger chances like he was last year, I mean, Kopitar knows where to pass the puck. Kempe knows where to pass the puck. They're going to draw people away from the defense. You get into the other lines with Fiala and everything like that. If he can be an opportunistic scorer, pot 20 goals and have anywhere between 20 to 30 assists for 40 to 50 points, I think that'd be a home run for a player in his second year. It does sound tough, like King's Rule is saying in the chat, but like I said, with great responsibility becomes great expectations, and my expectations aren't for him to limp along. If he's going to get this opportunity, whether it be in the top 6 or wherever, I'm going to expect production out of there, because in order for this team to take the next step, I'm tired of getting eliminated in the first round. We need players to take that next jump. And that's the whole point of this episode is, what does this team look like if we get these jumps from these kids? This team looks completely different if you get an extra 25 points from a young player.
Yeah, and that's kind of why we're doing this whole podcast, this whole episode, right? The young guns, and that's the whole theme. I feel like for the last few weeks, I get Kings fans messaging me what do you think about the team and whatnot, and it seems like every answer I give you is my expectations are probably a little lower than they have been in the last few years, or especially last year, but my excitement level is high because you have a lot of these young talent coming in and you really don't know what to expect. I mean, there's so much that can go right. There's so much that can go wrong. And I think that's what makes this season so exciting. It's we're only talking about Alex Laferriere. I mean, we're not even talking about Turcotte, Thomas, Byfield, who's really going to be moving now to his first full year in the center position. We'll be talking about Brent Clarke too. Jordan Spence, you can lump in there as well. I mean, he's going to be playing his second real full NHL season now, higher up in the lineup. So yeah, I mean, that's really the whole theme of this whole, not only this episode, Brandon, but the entire Kings season now coming into it.
Let's switch it over to the next second year player that's really going to be all eyes on him. And I don't have the notes queued up for what he said in the post, but for him to say his goals aren't just to make the squad this year, his goals are to be a difference maker in the NHL. So very high aspirations for Brent Clarke. It seems like every time the Kings throw a little challenge at him, like, hey, you only played 9 games, we're sending you back down. Hey, you're doing this. Hey, you're doing that. Like, he just seems to rise to the table, and his message is like, all right, I'm just going to take it with me. I'm going to do the best I can at this, and this is my goal. And I thought for him to say, well, it was the perfect answer. And you saw it, the way his face kind of this is what I mean. I'm coming here to wreck shop this season. I'm coming here to be a difference maker on this team. I'm coming here to be a difference maker in the NHL. I'm not here for participation trophies of making this roster. I'm coming to turn heads. And that's what you want to hear from your top 10 pick. That's what you want to hear from your offensive juggernaut. And that's what this conductor wants to hear from the Brent Clarke train, is that this guy means business. And I think that Clarke might be the biggest X factor to this team being productive this season, not only on the power play, but getting more offensive production from the blue line. I think the biggest question mark with him is who's he playing with, and how much are they going to rein him in? Are they going to let him be Brent Clarke? Joe, I'll start with you on this one. What do you think about that last statement? What do you think he's going to be paired, and what do you think they're going to let him do this season?
Man,
Brandon's
making me say,
yeah,
Joel,
he is.
He did that on purpose. I think he's going to play with Joel Edmondson. I think there's people that, and maybe you one of them, Brandon, and I wouldn't like argue it necessarily, that think he's going to play top 4 and he's going to play with Gavrikov. I could see it. I just think if we talk like that, I feel like we're totally overlooking how good Jordan Spence was last year. I think there's a case that can be made that Jordan Spence was a top LA defenseman for LA last year. Like, he was that good. So I really think Spence should be in that top 4 role with Gavrikov, in my opinion. So my guess is Clarke is going to play with Edmondson. To answer your second question, yeah, I mean, I think the Kings are going to want to have him focus on defense. I really do. Like, I think the Kings are going to say, listen, your first year, you're paired with Edmondson. So while, yes, you can maybe take some chances here and there, let's focus on, your defensive side of the game and shore that up before we get, do what you do, which, I think from what we saw last year, he only played 6 games, but you got everything you wanted. He led all defensemen in individual expected goals per 60. He was second on the entire team in shot assists per 60 behind only Kevin Fiala. Like, so he was making plays in the offensive zone to create scoring chances. Like, this is what he does. This is what he's going to do. I mean, I really hope that he gets the appropriate, I don't even want to say like ice time, because again, I think Jordan Spence is great. So I'm okay if Clarke starts on the third pair behind Jordan Spence, but hopefully they're finding opportunities to get him more ice, like, right, whether it's power play time, whether it's offensive zone draws. I hope that they're finding ways to do that, because he's doing everything that the Kings blue line has lacked for a long time. And it's different than Jordan Spence, right? Jordan Spence is he's not like Spence. I don't look at as like a playmaking defenseman, right? They're different. Clarke is a playmaking defenseman. I just said, in those brief time, he was second. He was creating chances. He was creating scoring opportunities. That's what he brings. He's not going to like light the lamp and score 20 goals, but he can pick up 30 to 40 assists in the right, as he gets going in his career. Like, he's that type of player, I think. So I'm bullish on the player. I'm a little bearish on maybe the opportunity for him in this first year, but we'll see.
Yeah,
Russ,
go ahead, Brandon.
I was going to ask you the next question is, will they force him and his opportunity similar to what we thought with Kaliyev, that his opportunity for ice time would be on the power play? With him most likely playing third pair, is that where their opportunity is to let his strong suit shine in that part of the ice?
Yeah, probably. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I see Lieb had mentioned that in the chat. He said the interesting discussion is how the Kings manage the D-men on the power play. Do all 3 play in Doughty, Clarke, and Spence, or is it only Drew and Spence? And yeah, I think that's where they should let Clarke excel, or at least give him the opportunity, because I don't know if it's any argument that he's probably the best power play quarterback on this team right now, to be honest with you, just by his creative offensive capabilities. And that's no knock to Drew Doughty. I mean, he's no argument for me, but he's the best defenseman on the team. But if you're looking to create purely offense, you want Brent Clarke on the ice. But it's just so tough, because, like Joe just said, Jordan Spence is just so damn good that you don't want to take away from his ice time. So they have to figure out a way to get all 3 of them on the power play, because they're all 3 probably a lot better than they would if they were just like one defenseman on each unit and just did 4 forwards in each one. So I'd put those 3 over 8 different forwards that they can put on the power play unit. Yeah. So, I mean, if you're trying to limit some ice time from Clarke or Spence because you only want to play 1 on the power play, then I think that's just a huge miss from management. But it'll be interesting to watch how they do it during 5-on-5, because I mean, you just gave Joel Edmondson what, $4 million? How much, Joe?
Stop.
You just
Remind
gave
me.
Joel Edmondson all that money, and now he's going to be third pair with Brent Clarke. It's like, how much time are they going to get really during 5-on-5 time when you're still paying Gavrikov his money, and you have Jordan Spence, who we just talked about, had this great year last year, not to mention Doughty and Anderson as your top pair. So it's like, that's where Jim Hiller, I feel like, is going to have the biggest, I guess, I don't want to say problem, but it'll be interesting to see how he tackles that situation with all three of those defensemen who are going to need ice time. But then how do you distribute that? And I think that's a question.
I go back to also, by the way, sorry, Brandon, like finding those moments, man, I really think Clarke can play the left side. Like, and I'm not saying, obviously they're not going to do it consistently, right? They got Anderson, Gavrikov, Edmondson, they got their left side. But if we're talking about finding opportunities, finding spots, if the Kings are trailing by a goal, late in the game, I genuinely think he can play the left side just because of the style that he plays, right? I really think that suits him, the aggressive, the left D is a little bit more up anyways. I really think that he can do that. So if they're talking about finding spots for him, I think there are, but I think we're also kind of getting a little excited because I just don't know how often it's going to happen.
Well, we saw it a little bit. I mentioned it when I went to the Dallas game that he was getting face-offs with Drew Doughty in the offensive zone. We've mentioned it multiple times that we would play all three. And Doughty's more of a shoot first point where Clarke tries to find that pass. He's really good at shooting the puck to get a rebound, where Doughty's slapping a one-timer to score. So they play kind of differently. Doughty's a good enough passer to play on the half wall. So I wouldn't be opposed to having Clarke at the point, Doughty at the half wall. But then where do you put Kopitar? You're taking one of your best players off the position he normally plays. So like they have some opportunities there, but they also had a lot of players on the power play last year that aren't exactly offensive juggernauts, and like they can afford to take a little risk. And you look at, hate to bring up another sport, but you look at football, which we're watching now. When a dynamic playmaker is struggling, the offensive coordinator designates plays to get him the football and get him the football in space. And I think Hiller needs to find a way to get Clarke the puck in offensive situations to benefit his biggest asset. If you're not going to give him minutes 5-on-5, you got to give him time in the offensive zone. So if it's a penalty and icing and you get an offensive zone face-off, Brent Clarke needs to be out there. Yeah. And then if they do that a lot, especially in the try to come back from being down or just early and often in games, and have them partnered with Doughty or partnered with Spence in the offensive zone, and say they don't win the face-off and it goes back and then they go back to the defensive zone, well, then just Clarke hops off the railing. The next cycle through is going to be the normal pairs and you move forward. But I think that's kind of where they're going to have to fit him in to make the biggest impact on this team.
Or he's in the NHL. Like, just let him play a shift. Like, he's going to be okay.
Joe, my dreams have been dashed for 2 straight seasons. Puck hasn't even dropped yet, and I want to think about kittens and rainbows regarding Brent Clarke here.
Understood.
So we have two guys that have both made their cup of coffee last year, Alex Turcotte and Akil Thomas. I think all three of us expect them both to make the roster or be there at the last cuts for the roster. I'm hoping for it because I got a bottle of fine booze on the line with Joe regarding the points there. But those are two guys.
Wait, what was that bet again?
30
either
points.
of them have to score how many points?
30. I thought it was 30 or 35. Yeah.
I think it was 30. Yeah.
30.
Either of them have to score 30 points.
It's going lower and lower every time I bring it up.
So those guys are going to be playing. We think Turcotte can play a little bit up and down, probably in the bottom 9. We think Akil Thomas might be the center for the 4th line. But where do these guys change? We're losing Blake Lizotte. Obviously brought his dynamic nature to the team in the bottom 6. Was able to push the play at times. You're getting Trevor Lewis signed back. How does he play the full 82 this year, or are they going to let the kids kind of infringe more on the ice time? where do you kind of see both of these guys fitting in, Russ?
I mean, Akil Thomas, I thought in just the few games that he played last season, I mean, he really opened my eyes because he came in and was just scoring at will. And then a lot of it was, I don't want to say fluke goals, but like they're playing, I think the few games were against San Jose, but I mean, goals are goals, right? I mean, you're looking to produce, especially as a young player, when you're first making your steps or your first games in the NHL and you're producing already. That's a great sign. So I'm actually really a little bit more excited for Thomas than I am maybe for Turcotte. And I think Turcotte might be a little bit more of a learning curve because I think they might have Turcotte at the center position and maybe Thomas on the wing. But I'm curious to see where they play. I wouldn't put them both on the fourth line. I'd like to see Thomas play with Deneau. I'm not sure. I have to go back and look. I don't know if they were pairs last year, but I feel like those two with more on the other side, Thomas can kind of give you that same kind of play style that Deneau and Moore bring, where it's like there's just a lot of movement, a lot of quick passes, and maybe Thomas can be that kind of, I guess, do that player that does all the dirty work, going hunting for pucks and going to the front of the net like we saw. I mean, I think the few goals that he scored, he ended up on his back on the ice right after the goal was scored. So, I mean, that kind of shows you the type of player that Akil Thomas is. And so that's why I'd like to see him maybe get a little, as far as like players in terms of like comparing Turcotte and Thomas, I think I'd like to see Thomas maybe get a little bit more opportunity up in the top six over Turcotte. But for Turcotte, I think you just kind of slot him in right where Lizotte was playing and to see if he can really take that role. Because that seems like it's the fourth line center position that the Kings don't really have, whether it's Thomas or Turcotte. But from everything I've watched from watching Turcotte over these last few years, especially last year, it seems like when he's actually fully healthy, he can really control play down the center ice position and really bring his two-way game to shine. So I'm curious to see how he performs in that position.
Yeah, I agree. I think Turcotte can step into, I think they're relatively big shoes to fill in Blake Lizotte. I think he's an excellent fourth line center, but I think Turcotte has the similar skill sets. I think he can do that. Akil Thomas, I'm really excited about. I think this kid can play. He's the one that I'm at risk, I think, of losing that bet to Randon because I think he can finish. I think he can play up and down the lineup. I think he can play power play. We've talked a lot about him, the Kings lacking a right shot forward on the power play. I wouldn't hate it to see Akil Thomas get an opportunity somewhere. I think he can. I think he's an underrated power play asset. So I'll be curious to see if he gets a look on either of the two units. But yeah, I'm really excited about Akil Thomas. The only hesitation I have with really both of these guys is their health. They just have not been able to stay on the ice the last handful of years, really. So hopefully they do, because that's, it allows the Kings an opportunity to have a little bit more versatility and flexibility within their lineup, perhaps, because both of them can play center and wing. Both of them have the skill set to play up and down the lineup if they need to. So I'm right there with you with Thomas.
My expectations are a little bit higher than health this season. I think, they're both healthy coming into the season. They don't have a lingering injury from last year. I think it's their time to take that jump coming into camp. So I hope that they both showed determination and why they're going to make the roster and kind of force the hand of Rob Blake and Jim Hiller, rather than them being like, oh, well, they didn't really do that. Artie's been here. Artie's the guy, or this, or, that. I think they need to force the hand similar to the way LaFerriere forced the hand last year. I mean, I want to see Akil Thomas playing up and down the lineup. I think that Turcotte, they've really have stuck him in the center his whole development program or profile here with the Kings. They've wanted him to play center up and down his development. So I think he probably will get the first shot at 4C between him and Thomas. But yeah, I mean, I like the Thomas shout out for the power play and having a right shot. I think you look at what Turcotte got brought up. He was the motor. He was that part of the season. The Kings were, had their head in the sand and everything was woe is me. And he's coming up there, and that fourth line had all the points. I think it was the first game or second game that he played, and he was dragging everybody along. And so I think my expectations are higher. I mean, that's why I made the bet with Joe, is I think that both these guys can have an impact. And with all these young guns, I mean, we're talking about with every single one of these players that we've talked about today, you're either first, second, or high third round picks. Guys that were drafted to be great. It's time they're freaking great, Joe and Russ. Let's time that they are drafted to do what or play how they're drafted. Yeah. I mean, for the last couple of years, we just wanted them to be healthy. I now want them to play some freaking hockey and push the Kings to the next level. Because this whole episode and this whole season is how we're going to get past the first round. And it's these boys showing up and showing out and showing these old guys that there's some young pups nipping at their heels. That's how we get to the second round.
Yeah,
Fair
they
enough.
have to produce. I mean, you look at the depth on the bottom six, or just at forward. I mean, after I guess Turcotte and Thomas, I mean, Sam and Fagimo, 13th forward, and then what? Glenn Godin, Jake Stunica. It's like there's not much else there. So it's if they don't produce, then the Kings are really in trouble.
The young guns producing for us are a thing, but the division changes up every single year. And the Kings weren't the only one rebuilding. Obviously, the Sharks are still in full build mode. The Ducks have had a lot of young talent accrue. You look at the Kraken are new in the division and have some young prospects. Where is a young prospect out of the Kings lineup in the division that could really push their team and maybe make an impact within the division next year? Joe?
So I think there's some really big names that are going to jump off. Obviously, the Macklin Celebrini in San Jose comes to mind. I want to shift gears a little bit, and again, Leo Carlson in Anaheim. I think kind of falls similar to that. Like he was a second overall pick last year. I think he's great, and I don't think we're going to see the same load management. At least I'm not expecting to. But sticking with Anaheim, we saw a really kind of a breakout year from Pavel Mintyukov, but I'm looking at another defenseman in Olin Zellweger. Like they're cooking over there in Anaheim on their back end with those guys. So I think he's somebody to look out for. And it wouldn't be some sort of preview without me talking about the Calgary Flames, but they're in transition. I'm not going to sit here and say Calgary is going to be the playoff team like I've thought the last few years. So this is a team clearly in transition right now, but they've got a few guys that I think could all make the roster and all be impacts in varying ways in Jacob Pelletier, Connor Zary, and Matt Coronado. These guys can play. So I know they're in a bit of a transition, but they're getting an influx of young talent into that team that if Huberdeau can figure it out, Mackenzie Weegar is an absolute stud on the back end. So this is not going to be a pushover of a team. Like, are they a team that's a contend for top 3 in the division? Probably not. Are they going to be sniffing around the wild card? Maybe if things break right. Like, again, transition year, I think, for Calgary, but doesn't mean there's not reason for optimism because I really like those 3 players. Trapper Nine's got one in the comments, but I think Randon wanted to make it a point for this guy because he's an obvious one too. So there's a lot, and those are just a handful that came to mind for me.
Talk about getting high production out of low cap. If they can get starter minutes out of Wolf and get some quality play, that could definitely help that team. Russ, where is a name that you want to kind of bring attention to for our fans?
Well, one name that I actually was hoping that the Kings would draft his draft year in 2021, but it was actually taken right before the Kings took Brent Clarke, was William Eklund. And I thought he had a really solid first full year with San Jose last year. Have his 45 points in 80 games, was a minus 45, obviously on a terrible Sharks team. But I've always loved the player. I remember watching a lot of his tape at the draft year, and then he went right before. I remember there's a New York Rangers writer, I forget his name offhand. But he was texting me at the time. He's like, I'm going to be so jealous if you guys get Eklund because he was just so good. And I just love watching Eklund play. He's just outstanding left winger now for San Jose. So I don't think San Jose is going to be a great team. I think they'll probably end up being probably the worst team, if not one of the worst teams in the NHL. But now you got this kind of same thing we talked, or Joe just mentioned with Calgary. You got this influx of young talent with Celebrini coming in, obviously the first overall pick last year. But Eklund, who's coming into his second full season, and now you have Yaroslav Askarov, who's they just traded for, who's presumably going to be probably the starting goaltender.
Will Smith.
I mean, yeah, and Will Smith. And I thought I watched a couple of the Sharks games over the weekend, and man, Will Smith is a player. Quinn Muskie is a player. Like, there's some really, really good players, and they're still a few years away. But it's like, it makes these Sharks games, like when you go to like Kings or you watch Kings games, you watch Kings Sharks games or Kings Ducks games. It's like it makes them a little bit more entertaining. Is you want to see these California teams get better because that heyday of when all three California teams were in the Stanley Cup playoffs. It was so good, not only for the sport, but for the state of California too, to grow hockey out here. But so I'm excited to see what those young players do in San Jose. I don't want them to be too good, but I think they're going to be good young players to at least be entertained by for the fans up there in San Jose.
I think an interesting one for me is Shane Wright, presumed first overall. Pick in his draft, fell in his draft year to 4, and then didn't make the Kraken lineup year 1. Had to kind of find his way through adversity. But last year was almost a point per game player for the Firebirds down there in Coachella Valley, and had 5 points in 8 games for the Kraken last season. So it wasn't like he wasn't producing at the NHL level, but they need some help down the middle, whether he'll be a 2C, a 3C, or just trying to give some quality minutes. I think that depending on how much trust they give him and his production, I mean, Kraken went from a playoff team to, kind of an iffy team last year. That could be a player that, gives some influx of points, and it's not all on the shoulder of Matty Beniers.
Another player on Seattle, Brandon, that I'll throw out here. He's not young guns in the sense that we're talking about in terms of first or second year pro, but ever since Eli Tolvanen was picked up by the Kraken after Nashville kind of waived him, he got a different opportunity. He's still only 25 years old. He feels like he's been in the league for a while. He kind of has been in the league for a while, but it seems like he may be older than he is. But he's got back-to-back 16-goal seasons with Seattle, and in the right opportunity, to your point, if guys like Beniers and Shane Wright take kind of next steps, like you could see a 20-goal scorer from Tolvanen and a guy that pots 50 to 60 points. So a little bit older than the young guys that we're kind of talking about, but he's got like a fresh opportunity here since his move to Seattle. Interesting player.
Well, if you guys want a fresh opportunity while listening, you can go and get some help at BetterHelp. BetterHelp, well, this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, one of our premier sponsors here at THPN. What is something that maybe you guys would love to learn as an adult? Sometimes maybe you learn new things or try to refine some skills. A lot of people think that learning is only for children, but we can always learn to get better. Right now, I know for me personally, my girl Amber is training in Florida hard, but it's tough to be away. How does your communication differ with your partner when they're with you versus when they're away? Are you learning the right skills to communicate all the time? Or do you just want to find something to better yourself? Is it gardening? Is it new language? BetterHelp can help you with that. And the therapy is not only just for the bad experiences, it's just to make you feel better. So whether or not you've been to therapy personally, or you want to talk about the broader benefits that it can bring to your life, BetterHelp is here for you. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, suited for your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. So rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/THPN and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/THPN. So let's get into our last little segment here, and it's training camp, because that bad boy starts tomorrow. The roster was released today. I know everybody's going to be wondering what the first line combinations are going to be, but I want to kind of talk about storylines. And there was the big storyline, we've mentioned it ad nauseum, was LaFerriere last season. Is Byfield going to take that next jump, being paired on the first line? PLD bringing in PLD. Where are they pairing him with? Is he going to be able to unlock something with Kevin Fiala? I think there's a lot of interesting and new additions to this team, which bring interesting storylines. Russ, what is one storyline from training camp that you're kind of excited to get answered?
Ooh, I don't know if I'm necessarily excited about, but I think one storyline we can probably be paying attention to is the battle in terms of those extra defenseman spots. So those 6, 7, 8 defensemen, because it feels like you just look at the roster that the Kings have. I mean, you have Edmondson, Anglin, Caleb Jones, Jacob Verara. There's a lot of like defensemen who you can see like maybe play here or there spot minutes, or even take that 7th spot or even 8th spot if they want to carry 8 defensemen. So,
Kyle Burrows.
Yeah, Kyle Burrows, another one too. Thank you. So yeah, there's a lot of defensemen. I'm curious to see if they end up keeping all of them. I know they just traded for Burrows. Obviously, they signed Edmondson, but you still have England now for one more year. You had just signed Caleb Jones. You gave Moverara a 2-year extension last year. You look at the left side of the defense, and a lot of it's kind of filling up. And I know Burrows is a right shot defenseman, but he plays both sides. So I'll be curious to see how that kind of plays out. But I guess a little bit more of an exciting storyline is just to kind of go back to the power play and see how that all shakes up in terms of the alignment and who's on the top unit and who's on the second unit. Because as we were just talking about with Spence, Clarke, and Drew Doughty, we want to see all 3 of those players get involved in some sort of aspect on the power play. So yeah, I'd be curious to see if that happens.
Joe, before you get going in there, Gwen comes in here with a question. How long does training camp go? Right up to the preseason games? So in football and hockey, they have training camp. The preseason games are sprinkled out throughout training camp, and they make cuts periodically. Now, Russ, you can correct me. Is there like certain cut dates, or is that at the discretion of the team?
Well, I think the Kings might actually have a little bit longer of a training camp because they're going to be traveling to Quebec City, and I believe there's a preseason game kind of mixed in there right before or whatever. So yeah, that might be extended a little bit longer. We might see some Ontario Reign type rosters for some of these preseason games, but yeah, it'll be extended pretty much all the way until the start of the season,
which is October 10th in Buffalo. So not always a game the Kings have went in there and won. Hopefully we can start the season off with 2 points. Joe, what do you think about those 2 storylines there? I mean, the defenseman, obviously, like Russ said, not exciting, but I mean, they have a bunch of defensemen. Are the Kings going to be playing 9 and 9? Is that how they're going to go this year? Or they just have all the big guys on the back end, or what's going on?
Russ has this propensity of like just kind of saying something in passing that like just totally deflates my mood. And I wasn't even thinking about the Kings possibly keeping 8 defensemen, but sure as shit, like they could roll with 8 defensemen, and just what a horrible decision that would be if they did it. So I'm sure it's likely. I hope that doesn't happen. I mean, I think Kyle Burrows is a perfect 7th defenseman, right? He's a right shot, but as Russ said, he can play both sides. I actually don't think he had that like bad of a season on just obviously in a really bad situation in San Jose. We all know Jacob Moverari is not making this team. We've been here. We've done that. That's not happening. So I think you look at Caleb Jones again. I don't think he cracks the lineup. So to me, it's between Burrows and Andreas Englund. I think it's an easy call, and just having a versatile guy like Burrows, I think just makes a lot of sense. I think that's a no-brainer, number 7 for me, and I hadn't even thought of the possibility of the Kings keeping 8 until Russ just said it, so I'm gonna have nightmares tonight.
That's what I do best.
But yeah, I mean, there's
Freddie Krueger over there.
Go down the list, right? Go down the list. There's the new guys. Like, where does Warren Fogle fit? Who's on the power play? You know, we talked about the defensemen. How do they sort that part of the power play? Who takes Arvidsson's spot on the power play, right? The biggest storyline for me, and I don't know if this is a cop out, but it's Quentin. This season is on Quentin Byfield's shoulders. If Quentin Byfield doesn't take that next step and become that, 70, 80 point guy, 2-way centerman, step into that role and like continue his progression, this team ain't getting out of the first round. Like, I don't know if that's being a little hyperbolic, but like, I really think that much of this season hinges on the progression of Quentin Byfield and the evolution of like this team turning over to him. Like, that's not to say RJ Kopitar is not going to play a key role. Of course he is. But like we started to see how impactful Byfield could be last year from a production standpoint, right? The year before, everybody talked about, and everybody got mad at everybody, all of us, the advanced stats people, because, well, he doesn't have scoring. He's not putting anything up, but he was dominating play. And it's like, eventually that's going to come. And it did. And so that you just see as he shifts to center, we'll see what type of adjustment there might be. I don't think that it's going to be drastic, but I also don't want to underrate it. There's a little more responsibility. Remember, last year he's playing on the wing. Now he's going to be taking faceoffs against Connor McDavid, maybe Leon Draisaitl. There's going to be a little bit more of a responsibility, perhaps, in defensive zone. I just don't want to overlook that completely. But this is a big, big year that if the Kings are going to take that next step, I think everything is on Quinton Byfield. How does he look in camp? How is he dominating preseason games? Like, that's what I'm looking for. Is Quinton Byfield here, and here to take off? Right. That's my biggest thing.
I like it. I like it a lot. I like that you're pushing the expectations up the board, because I didn't want it to be me again this season. But I think the centers in general are going to be interesting. Like, are they gonna fit Danault at 2C automatically all season? Is Hiller gonna be more willing to move things around? I know people are going to be interested in, are we going to play the 1-3-1 again? Well, probably. So but are we going to have more freedom throughout? Is the team going to be cycling their players? I think how they play is not really a preseason thing. That's going to be into a season thing. For a storyline for me, I'd like to see the storyline is the young guns for me. Like, where are they positioned? Who are they playing with? Mm-hmm. Are they elevating lines? And then, can we stop putting Kevin Fiala with nobodies? Can we give him some actual players,
please?
Players to play with. I think that he should be with Byfield, and I think they should force them. Like, if they have to go get coffee together every single morning, or drive to the rink or whatever, they need to be together at all times. And I think that's going to be kind of what I see is what do they determine? Because they've been kind of just putting Fiala as this afterthought on the top 9 lines or whatever, or the top 3 lines. And oh, okay, well, we got these lines here, and where's the last piece? Oh, Kevin Fiala gets put there. Kevin Fiala, you got brought in to be a point per game player. He shouldn't be an afterthought. He should be positioned to elevate this team to the next stratosphere. And so I hope that they kind of figure that out this year.
Yeah, just kind of to Byfield, like what Joe said, I think this needs to be the year where he takes over as the best player on the team. Where I think we saw a little bit of flashes like that last year. He kind of tailed off toward the end of the year. But this needs to be the year where he's okay, this is going to be my team now going forward. Kind of not really move aside Kopitar, but you've done your work. Let me kind of take the reins here and lead the team in minutes, at least in forwards. So yeah, I totally agree with you, Brandon, too. I mean, you have to have Fiala and QB together. I think those two already shown some decent chemistry playing together. And yeah, if they're going to be your 2 best players, along with maybe Adrian Kempe as right there with them, I think you need to pair them together. So if I know they're already doing that with Fogle, like you mentioned, Randy, you wouldn't have Fiala and QB tied. They're doing that with Warren Fogle and Quinton Byfield, who have been working out in Toronto together for a little bit already. So they seem to be developing some chemistry. But yeah, I think if the Kings,
that line can get up and go, I tell you that.
Yeah, Fiala, QB, and Fogle. I think that's gonna be a really fun line. I said it earlier. Once they signed Fogle, I've been a huge fan of his. So I think he'll be able to kind of help those other 2 players do what they do best.
I think goaltending, right? I think that's going to be a storyline, as it was throughout.
You want to talk about goaltending, Joe?
Well, the storyline just for this.
Hey, Joe, you want to talk about goaltending? You seem like you want to talk about goaltending.
I don't have a concern, right? I just think that going into last year, everybody's the goaltending, they have no shot because the goaltending is I think the goaltending's gonna be just fine, and the goaltending was just fine last year. So I think the storyline coming in this year between the pipes with Rittich and Kemper, Kemper makes a lot of money. Can he have a bounce back season? I'm a Kemper guy. I was a Kemper guy back to his Arizona days. I thought he was a good goalie. He's been in and out, had some injury stuff. I think he's going to be fine. I don't think he's going to be worth his money. And I also just, the Kings, I think they're a top 5 save percentage team last year. So it's not as if their goaltending was a problem last year. So as long as it doesn't become one, then fine. So I guess really as long as Kemper stays healthy, I'm fine with seeing them split some minutes. Again, I guess irregardless of the contract, that is what it is. But yeah, I think that's just inevitably going to be a storyline, I think, because Kemper's coming off a season. Remember, he lost his job to Charlie Lindgren. So you don't do that by playing well. So they need him to kind of play better in order to get the Kings and kind of keep them where they were. They were a good goaltending team last year. So they need to be steady again.
A storyline could be the health of Phoenix Copley, because injuries with Darcy Kemper and Rich is on the older side. What does Phoenix Copley look like with his health? I know I'd be fine with Portillo starting a couple games, but I think a lot of fans would be scared, maybe excited and scared, if he had to start 10, 15, 20 games because of injury, or having said Rittich or Kemper have to play every single game because the other one is injured and the Kings are afraid to rely on that. So I know Copley is healthy, but being healthy, like, and cleared to play and playing at an NHL level hockey are two different things. And you see it's different with every sport. So I'm sure it's going to be different with hockey, but goalie isn't exactly a position known to be light on your knees and not needing reactionary time with your legs. So that's exactly what his position is entailing. And so how does the ACL fare for a goalie? And the NFL kind of what the time frame is, because it happens all the time. Really never even heard of a goalie having an ACL injury or what that time frame could look like or how that infects the way he plays. He's not exactly a small human being. So you have more weight on that knee and asking the knee to do a lot of things. So, and he's not exactly a spring chicken either. So I think the health of Phoenix Copley is going to be a big thing, because if they need several games or weeks of games from Portillo, Kings might be in trouble as well. Anything else, boys?
I like it. Again,
I like it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what Copley's full health is right now. I'm not sure if I remember seeing him on the ice when I caught a glimpse of the captain's kits that they had going on. I don't remember if I saw Copley out there, but when did he suffer the injury? Like early part of the year, like really January, February, around there. That's, I don't know, 9 months. So he could be right around full 100%. I remember that. I still remember him skating out there for the team photography session. That was crazy to even see him out there. That felt like only a few months after his big injury has happened. And if I know Phoenix Copley just from his always taking care of his body with the tea stuff and being this Bear Grylls type of guy he is out of Alaska, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him on the ice for training camp tomorrow.
You mean he's the liver king? Is that what you're saying?
Dude, absolutely shredded, man. It's unreal.
Well, like I said in the beginning of the pod, we have a lot of cool stuff coming up for you. Our first crossover is going to be with Sin Bin Vegas on Friday. I believe we might have a surprise episode for you guys tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that about training camp. Surprise, not surprise. I got a couple other crossovers with guys from with the Vancouver Canucks, with the Flames, a bunch of teams out there, fillers. And so keep an eye out for that schedule. We're going to be posting it when new stuff comes out. Find all of our articles here at hockeyroyalty.com. Please take advantage of our lovely sponsors at DraftKings and BetterHelp. This podcast is always sponsored by BetterHelp. All of our Twitter handles are there at the bottom, at hockey_royalty, at RandallCommando24, at NHL Russell, at JW Paterino, and our rain coverage always with Kyle Garcia at Kopitar for HOF. Man, it feels good to be back, boys. We have a lot of stuff going on to get you guys ready for the season. But we're nothing without our fans. So thank you guys for always tuning in and keeping it strong. And as always on this podcast, go Kings go.